the end of the day. And I thought Admiral McGinn did an excellent job of explaining the connections between migration and chaos and state failure in places like Africa or the Middle East and terrorism and issues that affect American security directly. Let me say just a word about politics here. And here you've got the domestic politics here in the United States, but you've also got international politics. U.S. and the European Union, U.S., China and India, U.S. and Russia. On the domestic front, we have got, as I said, a very partisan situation, a very divided situation when we look at climate and energy policy. You've probably heard of Waxman-Markey. This is a piece of legislation that passed out of the House of Representatives this summer. It was an extremely narrow, completely party lines vote, 219 to 212. That is literally almost a 50-50 split, so it just got over the hurdle. In the Senate, we're looking at a situation right now where in order to pass legislation that will support Waxman-Markey, you've got 43 likely yes votes as of last month, 35 likely no votes, and 21 undecideds. So where those undecideds go is going to be all the difference, because you've got to get to 60 votes to pass a filibuster in the Senate and get anything done. 10 of those 21 recently sent a letter to the President in which they said basically one thing, which is we will support some kind of climate change legislation, but only if there are protections for American business. And I think that that's the bottom line. Where the rubber hits the road on the domestic politics is finding a solution that protects and supports American business, but at the same time gives the United States on the world stage the kind of position where we can say, yes, we're taking action to cut our emissions, yes, we're taking leadership. We can go to the Indias and the Chinas of the world and say, all right, now it's your turn. That's the compromise, and we're not there yet. I want to say a word about the United States vis-a-vis the rest of the world here, the international politics. A recent survey asked, how high a priority do you think your government should place on addressing climate change on a scale of 1 to 10? The citizens of Mexico answered 9.1 on average. China, they said 8.8. The UK, 8.2 out of 10. The United States said 4.7. So it was the lowest out of 19 countries surveyed. So the world clearly gets the idea that the United States is not interested in addressing climate change. Now, whether that's right or wrong, the perspective from the rest of the world is we're the problem. The United States is the problem. And that's a difficult position to be in when you go into global negotiations. Like at the end of this year, in December, there will be the next round of the so-called Kyoto process in Copenhagen, Denmark, where the rest of the world is going to be looking at the United States and saying, what have you done? Where is the American leadership? But the American response has traditionally been and will continue to be that we are not the problem, because our emissions in the last 20 years have grown only 17%. Compare that to India, where emissions grew 125%, or to China, where they grew 178%. Of course, in absolute terms, the United States is still at the top or near the top. China and the U.S. are the world's largest emitters of carbon gases. But they're followed very closely afterwards by Russia, India, and the European Union. Russia is an interesting case, just as an aside, and I'm happy to talk more about it, because Russia could actually be one of the biggest, and this is sort of an unexpected thing, but one of the biggest leaders diplomatically on addressing climate change for the weird reason that climate change policies are benchmarked to the year 1990. Well, what was different about Russia in 1990? It was the Soviet Union. It was a much bigger country, and it had huge, dirty industry, which was artificially supported as part of their military-industrial complex to fight the Cold War. Well, that means if you benchmark Russia's level of emissions to the Soviet military-industrial complex, then actually Russia could even increase its emissions from today and still not be at the level that it was at in 1990, which means Russia could essentially commit to a huge reduction or to no further increases as a way of building political will and not actually suffer any economic consequences for that. It's just one of those artifacts of history in the case of Russia. And then lastly, I think the Europeans have been both helpful and unhelpful here. You know, we laugh at Europe for being kind of socialist and being super, you know, they've got green parties over there that aren't actually just a joke but actually have political power. But the truth is they're laughing all the way to the bank. Because to the extent that the Europeans get this and they're transitioning their economy to take advantage of this energy efficiency opportunity, they're the ones cornering the markets, they're the ones enjoying the first mover advantage, and if we all have to come along afterwards, we're going to be paying them for the privilege. So I think that there's a real opportunity to partner with Europe there, and the Europeans have put up hundreds of billions of dollars, euros actually, to assist with this international adaptation effort and so on. So I'll close it there and just suggest that on the domestic front, where the rubber meets the road, is we've got to find a solution that protects, supports, encourages, and finds opportunities for American business at the same time that it allows us to have leadership on the international stage and go to India and China having achieved something and say, we've led, now you follow.
I'd like to ask a question and then tell you about a sampler my wife gave me right before I retired. The question is, based on the discussion that we've had so far, Matt and I talking basically, is there anybody that thinks that business as usual for the United States in terms of energy security and climate change is a viable, sustainable path? You do.
Well, I've got a problem when you put the two together. I think you have to look at them separately. They don't travel the same road. Okay. I've watched your slides. I've listened to Matt's. Matt's, what are your credentials?
I direct the group called Partnership for a Secure America.
You're a young man.
I'm a young man.
He just got out of a medium security prison. No.
I'm sorry. I'm a lawyer. I have to. I'm reluctant to admit it, but I'm sorry. I went to Stanford Law.
Stanford. How about undergrad?
Harvard.
Oh, geez.
Sorry.
Everything you just said. The point, I guess, to answer the question you asked, okay, but I needed that background so I could talk a little bit intelligently, I think. I am an engineer. I'm a Villanova grad with an Augustinian background. I've been around a long time. I'm an old fart now. And I've been to 77 countries in this advanced world, thanks to the United States Navy. I've been to India, and Pakistan, Indonesia, all these places we talk about, and Africa. And I see Darfur, and I see these other things. And I picked this up out of your group you're with. And I'm reading 400,000 people killed in Darfur, 2.5 million displaced, rape and murder every single day, and the genocide continues. And it does. 40 million babies in the United States. They make Stalin and Hitler look easy. And they said, well, you're just one of those right-wing. I said, no, let's stop a second. If we take the life, the United States achieved it. Why, as an engineer, do I have to worry about the stale darter when I'm trying to provide water to human beings?
If I could just get you back to the question.
That's the question.
Do you think that business as usual, in terms of the energy path that this nation's on, and dealing with climate change or the potential consequences for climate change, is sustainable?
We are sustainable. We are now billions of years old, millions of years old. How long has the Earth been around? Sustainable, I'll give you another simple example. I am one of the better engineers in the Commonwealth of Virginia for creating wetlands. I do something very simple. I go see where the wetlands are, I take a survey and run, and I find the elevation of that wetland. I put the new stuff I have to prepare to the same elevation, and I walk away. And God, the birds and the bees make some of the finest wetlands you've ever seen. I'm keeping it green.
Can I ask?
Keeping it sustainable.
Can I ask a sort of rhetorical question about engineering? Because
Yes.
my father is a civil structural engineer, and he does earthquake engineering. And one of the big challenges with earthquake engineering on the West Coast is not can you survive the sort of 5.0, 6.0 that we.
Inertia for the size of the earthquake.
So the question is, what happens when you have a 100-year quake, right? How many buildings can you endure losing? Because you're going to lose a lot of them. And how many lives is that going to mean? And I think that one of the problems with this climate change phenomenon, and the generals who worked on this advisory board made it very clear, is that we're not looking at one crisis scenario 10 years from now that we might have to deal with. We're dealing with a simultaneous global crisis.